Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming on such a beautiful day. Jeannie will speak first, but I wanted to add to Beth's introduction that a new role for Jeannie. We have recently hired Jeannie at ESF to be part of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment. It's a way of acknowledging Indigenous knowledge about the environment at ESF. We've elevated scientific knowledge, sort of what we call Western knowledge about the environment. And we want to start to really recognize Indigenous environmental knowledge by bringing in people from the nation who have this kind of expertise. So Jeannie is our first, she's our charter, we're not sure the title, Indigenous Scholar in Residence, Indigenous Elder in Residence, we're not sure the title, but we're just thrilled to have Jeannie in that position. So I wanted to just add that to the.
We just start. I'm thinking to hear up like this. We're going to check on. Well, yeah, just could start speaking. Okay, thank you everybody for coming to listen to us. This is kind of a new thing, but I guess we'll do our best. I guess we've come to talk about some of the native plants in this area that we at Onondaga Nation have always used. I should tell you that I am a citizen of Onondaga Nation, the eel clan, very large extended family. I am mostly a lifetime resident there. I've moved around a little bit, but this is where my heart is, this area here. Right here where we sit, we're in the Aboriginal homeland of my people, especially this area here. There's a lot of very rich history to be known about this area. I just had to add that, and most of you, I guess, know that Onondaga Nation is just a few miles from here, not far. It's a fairly small community. We're fairly quiet. We don't have any big loud stuff going on. We are people, a nation of people that follow our traditional teachings and our traditional ceremonies as much as possible in the year-round cycle. I'm a little bit tired today because that full moon kind of kept me up. A little bit of energy there, you know. But also, to tell you about myself, I have grown up there. I am the eldest of 10 in our family. I'm the older sister of 8 brothers and 1 sister. And our parents primarily raised us the way they were raised, to use the natural foods and plants that were around us and to be appreciative. The most important thing was the appreciation. So we were very much taught to follow the giving, doing a Thanksgiving for every day, for all these various plants that we used to eat our food. We harvested food, and some of these things that people call weeds are some of my favorite foods that we did that all of my life. And so I'm very appreciative to be in a group of people like this who appreciate it and love plants. So I guess that's a little bit of an intro. And then I also have spent 34 of my years being a home birth midwife. And that had, I had basically known some plant medicine and being raised in it through my parents, through my whole community. And then after getting married and having my own family, I raised my own children. So now I'm on to great grandchildren, giving them the same stuff, whether they like it or not. So I guess we're just going to talk about some common plants here that we use and enjoy and appreciate it. I have a few funny little stories about stuff, you know, people think are weeds and my mother always told us not to call them wild. They're not wild, you know, like crazy, it's wild. They're gifts, they're beautiful, pleasant things for us. Keep ourselves strong and healthy and well fed. So some of the plants, so just some of the plants we thought we would talk about, plants and trees around us. I've been fortunate to be able to live in a fairly quiet place with a lot of trees around. I was one of the best tree climbers. Not working. They didn't hear all that.
Oh, they did. We're just not the pictures now.
Oh,
There we go.
there we go. All right, one of the most common things that we have in our area, in this whole area that's native here, is cedar. Cedar helps me to appreciate a lot of things. I love the cedar tree, the aroma of it and the taste of it. We make some gentle tasting tea with the leaves of the cedar plant. But we can also use it as a medicine. It's very good. Different types of illnesses, like a bad cold is really good, helps pretty quickly. It's also a spiritual plant for us. We use it somewhat in ceremony. We do a lot of healing things with it. One of the most comforting things with a cedar plant is cedar bath, where you would just gently simmer a good amount of cedar leaves and then put it into the bathtub and soak it. It's really, really wonderful. And not only does it comforting to your body, but it's comforting to your spirit, and the fragrance of it is so nice. We don't have a written script, so I have to. All right, what I did the last time.
Right. Yeah, and I'll just add, since this is the Habitat Gardening Group, many of you know this is such a great landscape tree. It's a great screen, wonderful for wildlife. Yeah, it's beautiful. So historically, much of downtown Syracuse would have been cedar swamp. Much of Camillus, at least the area canal through the village of Camillus, would have been cedar swamp. It might have been the most common habitat type, the northern white cedar swamp in Syracuse and some of these areas where you have swamps. A lot of the area became the Erie Canal, right? Because it's low, it's flat, you know, an easy place to dig a big ditch. So one of the longest lived trees in the eastern forest, can live over 1,000 years old. Just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tree.
Okay, another common kind of a tree that grows is black cherry. Black cherry is found commonly in our area here, and that's also used on. I primarily use it as a medicine for fevers and colds, the same kind of a thing, respiratory. It's really good using the bark of it. We use the bark. We try not to damage the tree. If we approach any kind of a tree or a shrub that we might want to take part of, we just do it very carefully and conservatively. Like you can take the tips of some branches. Some trees you can make just a strip on the healthiest part. Take a strip and take the inner part of the bark. Instead of we don't need to chop a tree down and cut a branch off, you know. So yeah, black cherry is very common to use for throat stuff, throat
Yeah, and I'll just add that certainly in terms of your habitat gardening, I mean, many of you probably know this, but black cherry is in the genus Prunus aranda. And this is one of the most valuable genera in terms of habitat value because it supports hundreds of species of caterpillars. Those caterpillars provide the protein that birds and other vertebrates need. I'm sure you guys know about Doug Tallamy's work, most of you anyway. So this would have been one of his all-star trees. But there's other woody plants in this genus, including chokecherry, which kind of grows like a weed in some places, but also really valuable. Also the native wild plum, and there's a couple species. There's beach plum, there's Canada plum, and these were here, would have been here historically and provided fruit to native people. And they were one of the plants that, so if you talk to archaeologists, which I do a fair amount, they say they find plum pits at archaeological sites. So this would have been an important native food. And of course, the berries are also, the cherries are also wonderful. So you get food for birds, for people, for caterpillars, and yeah, you can't go wrong. Black cherry.
Okay, the next one is the white pine, which I don't know how much people have heard very much of our native culture, but the white pine is very, very important because it's central to many of our sacred beliefs. This area in particular here, as I mentioned before, is very important in our history, our cultural history. The white pine is a beautiful tree that grows very high, and we have very much cultural beliefs in the white pine tree that was planted right here when the Confederacy of my people was first arranged. Our people lived in this area very, very much. And at one point in time, they were not living well together. I guess they were fighting. Anyways, a great message came to our people across this lake here. This message came to us, a most precious message of peace, and how to live together and be thankful and grateful to treat each other well. So this white pine is a symbol of that time that came. This message came and helped us to rearrange itself in this beautiful large family and gratefulness and thankfulness for everything around us. So this white pine tree was planted in this area near the lake, and underneath it there was buried all these weapons of war, things used to fight each other, so that our people will no longer fight amongst themselves. This tree was buried. And it is also said that this tree has 4 white roots that reach in every direction, all the 4 directions, in order for us to carry the words of peace out on this world. To share the words of peace, gratefulness amongst other people also. So, so this white pine is most precious tree, and it's beautiful, and it's grows so high and so strong that one of our symbols is that these eagles, there's quite a few eagles living over here now, that on top of this white pine tree was an eagle place, because the eagle is the strongest of all the birds, the leader of the bird family that can see far and far and wide. So this eagle looks over us and protects us and warns us of dangers and reminds us of our teachings of peace and live a good life. So besides that, I've seen some white pine trees that were unbelievably huge. And oh, I don't know the age of trees like passion. But there's so many things we can do. We can make some delicious tea out of the leaves. You know, you don't cut the whole branch off, you just take a little bit, and you take the leaves and simmer it gently. And I should say that whenever we are making a medicine out of any kind of a plant, let's put our feelings into it. And if we're cooking this for somebody's medicine or for somebody's tea to drink, put gentle feelings in it, and we only simmer it gently. We don't boil the heck out of it. You know, like, we want that gentle stuff, and it comes from all blended. So that's what we do at Cedar. We use it to as a key to help to comfort ourselves and to carry the messages of peace for us. And like I can't say, you know, this area here was one central area for all these things that happen amongst our people. We did live in a wide land, honestly, our ownership of the land that we lived on went from the Thousand Islands to Pennsylvania. Our people lived all amongst all that. And right now, we're stuck on a little piece of land that's just south of the city. All we have left is from so many illegal takings and illegal agreements that were made. So we'll move on. That's not part of this. Somebody go on about that.
Yeah, I'll just add, for Eastern White Pine, there's another great annotated tree, one of Talame's all-stars, I believe. As Jeannie said, this is one of the tallest trees in the Eastern Forest, and it was really important for raptors. Like, you know, Jeannie mentioned of the bald eagles, but you'd often find like eagle nests or osprey if you're close to water, and these white pines that really tower above the rest of the trees. If you've ever taken Route 17 down towards New York City, especially in the winter, you notice this. You see the hardwoods and then the white pines, you know, like 20 feet above. It's really remarkable. There was one historically in downtown Syracuse that was 4 feet in diameter. I'm not sure the height, but unfortunately it was cut down, and this is probably a relic of that cedar swamp. So these white pines would have occurred on higher areas in these swamps. I mean, they weren't tolerant of being flooded, but if you had little hummocks, that's where they would grow. And if you ever get to Nelson Swamp, which is a great cedar swamp, you find big old white pines on these hummocks. So that's probably, downtown Syracuse is probably similar. A little story about white pine that some of you may know. This was the tree, most people think, that saved Jacques Cartier and his men when they were sailing up the St. Lawrence River in 1534. They overwintered in the St. Lawrence, and they started to get really sick. Their flesh turned black, their gums got weak, their teeth started falling out, like it looked really bad. And the native people of the area brought limbs and not trunks, but limbs with the foliage of what we now think to be white pine. They chopped it up, made tea, like Jeannie said, and lo and behold, this illness, this physical ailment, just disappeared. Probably they had scurvy, and white pine is high in vitamin C. So, you know, you wouldn't have had Florida oranges, right, in the winter. So things like white pine, I believe cedar, a lot of these conifers leaves are high in vitamin C. So
if you ever get scurvy,
well, I've always thought, you know, Jeannie talked about stealing the land. I've always thought that probably people regret giving him the tea anyway.
Okay, one of the next plant is sassafras, which is one of the most delicious ones. we use sassafras roots. We gather the roots of the small plants and make tea. It's very delicious. And it's also good medicinally, just for overall well-being. Some people will drink it for blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure or low blood pressure, I supposedly it regulates that, but don't overdo it because it'll carry you too far the other way. It's just a very pleasant tea, and it's used in some cooking somewhat if you were making some stew or if you put it on meat. It's very beautiful leaves. I just love it. I also know that down south they use those leaves for the gumbo they cook with those dried leaves. So it's got an overall pretty good, useful, beautiful plant to have. And we just only harvest it in the springtime.
Another good plant that would make a great landscape tree. I don't see this planted often. I don't know, maybe it's not as available as it should be, but you know, Jeannie mentioned the tea, the young leaves are edible. And around here, it seems to be most common in sandy soils. Like if I were looking for sassafras, I'd go to either the northern part of the county or Oswego County, where there's a lot more. And one of the neat things about it is, you know, you get these thickets because it root sprouts. But then sometimes you see a tree, like I'll see a tree with bark I don't recognize. It's kind of orange and chunky, kind of, what'd you call it? Like ridges, and it's a big sassafras, so they can grow to quite large trees as well. Mm-hmm. It's also, if you're concerned about, thinking about caterpillars, it's a host for the spice bush swallowtail, even though it's not spice bush, sassafras. Of course, the same family, the Lauraceae, and for some of the giant silk moths. So if you're interested in insects, another good native to plant.
Okay, here's another one that's very popular is witch hazel, and that grows pretty much freely and easy to find. I love those little blossom things that look like little nuts, kind of. And it has a particular flavor and aroma to it that I find quite pleasant because it brings healing memories to me. A lot of these plants I identify with the aroma or the taste because I have my family has always used them as children growing up. And witch hazel is really good. Well, actually, right during this period of the last few years, we've used a lot of it on people that have had COVID. So it seems to kind of temper it so that the virus was not quite so violent in the body. It's very, very pleasant. Another one you can use like for flu or some kind of respiratory stuff. Most of these plants are really, really kind of generally healing. There are some that are more specific, and some people know more about it than others, so the more specifics. But witch has a very pretty bush also that would grow, so be a good plant for people to plant. I guess that's it.
Okay. Yeah, this would make it great if you have like a small area where there's shade. This is an understory tree in our local forest. So this would make a great shrub for that kind of site. It's also pretty tolerant to being cut down. I know of one that was cut down to nothing because people thought it was a weed and it just bounced right back. And one of the neat things about witch hazel that people in this crowd probably know are the flowers. You know, after all the asters are done and you know, you think, well, no more flowers till May or April. These little strap-shaped petals come out of the witch hazel, and it's just a wonderful thing. So has anyone planted witch hazel?
I do. I was actually going to ask how long till they start to flower. It's about 4 years, 5 years.
Oh, good question.
And I'm not seeing flowers.
I don't know. Does maybe somebody else knows?
Is it supposed to flower like in November time?
Yeah, October, November. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen them either. I've got a plant that's about 2 years old.
Yeah.
Well, you might have 2 more years.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of these plants, understood plants, they need enough sun to produce flowers. I mean, it does take energy to produce flowers. So if they're in deep shade, they probably won't.
No, it's in the sun.
Oh, okay. So much for that.
The rat has definitely gotten the better of it
Yeah.
for a while. So, and I didn't put any metal around it to protect it. I want it to
Sure. Feed the rabbit.
grow on its own.
Yeah.
You had gave the 6 years of me. Okay.
6 years.
Is it dioecious or monoecious?
It's monoecious. The witch hazel. In other words, male and female flowers on the same plant.
Okay, this is a very popular plant. In so many ways, it's a beautiful plant. I love to look at it. It's more like a shrub, a large shrub. But those berries are so valuable. I really value them and look forward to the harvest. You have to beat the birds to get to it. Sometimes there's some underneath the birds and get you. But there's so many uses for elderberries. I actually harvest a good amount and dry some of them. And then some of them we make cough medicine. We can brew that up and make a nice cough medicine with just elderberries and water, and you make a decoction, and then you can add honey to it. That's very good. It works very well. Elderberry tea, and tea out of the berries is excellent if somebody is like in bed really sick with high fever or just real sick. It's also very good for the immune system. So many people take it regularly, daily, in order to avoid illness. Some people make pie out of it. Look, elderberry pie.
Jelly.
They make wine. Elderberry wine. I tried to do that, but I wasn't doing something right. It can't. But there are so many things that even some other things that I don't know if they're very commonly known, but elderberry is good for not the berries, but the shrub, the bush itself, are good for some types of muscle aches and injuries. I am the older sister of 8 brothers, so and they're all very athletic. So we had a lot of home remedies for bruises and aches and pains and stuff like that. So what we would do is take a length of elderberry shoots. You know, they have really thin shoots. You could take the elderberry shoot, and in 2 ways you could either scrape it, or else you could just open it up somehow and put it on raw. Say if you had, I'll say my arm, if you don't want to say my leg, but if you, say if I had a hurt somehow, a big bruise or sprain, we put this elderberry right on it, right, just wrap it, keep it on there, and I swear by the next day, It's just like, it just takes all the ache and pain out of them. But I should remind you that we're talking about all these, so far, bushes, but any kind of plant life whatsoever, however we use them, we have to acknowledge them. Because as we know that all things growing have a spirit. And that spirit is what's coming to help us to take care of ourselves and each other. So when we approach these and we go to harvest them, we just say thank you, do a little thanksgiving and acknowledgement. And when you get done with it, any kind of plant material, whatever it is, we take it back out somewhere and kind of give it back to the earth. Don't throw it in the trash. Take it back out there and say thank you. So that's what we would do with these elderberry, use like the thin stalks.
I don't have much to add except another great plant to add to your yard. I mean, the berries feed the birds.
A lot of birds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The birds really love this.
Yeah, they're nice and small, so they can fit into, like these little songbirds fit right down in the crop. So beautiful flowers.
Yeah. Oh, this is kind of a cute one. This is one of my most favorite foods on earth. I live for the day the milkweeds come up. I love milkweeds. Mostly we use them for food. They're delicious. It's a real gentle plant, so you don't have to cook it a whole lot. We usually harvest the tops about this much. Pull the tops off. And also when they come to bud, those things are delicious just before those buds open up. So we love that. And some people say that that milky stuff is good for warts, but I never tried it. I do have a funny story though I'd like to tell you. I have a very good friend, and we discuss plants a lot. We talk about a lot of beliefs about plants. And we talked about milkweed. I said how milkweed is one of my favorite foods. And he said, this man has a school. He teaches herbal medicine. And he said, how do you prepare your milkweeds? Do you boil it twice? And I thought, no. It's a very gentle plant, almost the same as asparagus. If you pick it right on the top, you know, nice. Oh, it's delicious. And so this guy says, you don't boil it twice? This is, no, I don't even boil it. I just like kind of simmer it till it takes a very short while. I said, well, you know, it's dangerous. That could be dangerous because there's a certain chemical in there that you would rinse out of, throw the water out and then cook it again. And I went, no, it's so delicious the way it is. I can't imagine cooking it, throwing out one. What do you get left with the second time around? So my friend says, well, you know, that stuff can be poison if you're not careful how you do it. And I said, well, you know what? If you ever come along and see a whole pile of dead Indians laying around, you'll know we didn't cook our. It's a little funny. I got it. I'm still alive. But that's a wonderful plant and it's beautiful. I just love that plant. And I love to eat the buds. And that's a good plant to have in your yard, or your garden too.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly the common milkweed, the swamp milkweed, another beautiful plant, and butterfly weed. And there's other milkweeds as well, but of course everybody should plant milkweeds for monarchs. I remember standing on Jeannie's porch once and there are all these milkweeds out there, and I thought, oh, that's so great for the monarchs. And Jeannie said, oh no, we're gonna eat them.
Well, I also should tell you about the other milkweed, the butterfly weed that is so beautiful, bright orange, you know, one of the most beautiful, intense colors. That is really excellent. The root is excellent for lung issues. You need to clean out the lungs. But boy, it's a darn thing to harvest because it's got this tech straight down, and it just loves to grow in rocks and stuff like that. So if you don't have gloves, you're gonna be all nicked up and you gotta dig it out with a pickaxe or something. You know, but it's so beautiful. That is one of the most beautiful plants, that butterfly weed. Yeah, that people could appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it might be listed as threatened in the state. Jennifer, did you want to
Just a quick question about the shoots. If you
Yes.
cut those shoots to cook and eat,
Yes.
will that plant come up again?
Well, this one,
Yeah, will it come up again?
The milk, the
I
common
would
milkweed,
imagine
will it
so, but
continue
I've
to
never
grow?
eaten this one. The butterfly weed?
No, the common milkweed.
Oh, this one. Oh, heck, yeah. Because it's kind of a rhizome root, and what happened was behind a little way behind the house, it had a little patch there that I harvested, and just to help it along, I went out there a couple times with a bucket of water and just came right back. It didn't go on forever, but I did get the second time it came back up. Yeah. Okay, the next one that is my other most favorite. They're all my favorite. Yeah, I just live for the time when these leeks come up. They call them rats also. These are the most delicious food too also. But some people do cook them twice, bring it to a boil, and then change the water because I guess it's too strong for them. I don't know why else would they be doing that. But this is like taking in a lot of garlic, and it's one of the first things in the spring. I should tell you, one of our teachings about these the first foods in the spring, and I mentioned before, is that we follow the natural cycle of things, and we have our ceremonies and things during our life, the yearly cycle, and the first things that come into springtime are like these, and the onions, the little tiny wild onions they call them, and these, you know, anxiously go out and harvest them up. But we got to be careful not to over harvest because that has happened in some areas. So we just have a big old meal out of these stuff because my mother had told me that we're set up on this natural cycle because if we had been eating properly over the winter time, we would have been eating heavier foods, root vegetables, and meat. And so in the springtime, it's more time to kind of lighten up and clean out our system and get ready for the more greener types of foods. So I was always taught that this is very important for us. Very important for us to eat this in the springtime. So we do. It's a bit of a job. We've got and harvest them, and some people harvest only the leaves, but we eat the whole plant. We dig the plant up, and it's not hard. Just take a fork and lift them up and eat the whole thing. But part of the warning I would like to give is what has happened on the Rand tract down in the valley has been extremely over harvested. And it was just sad to see that has happened because there are walkways, paths in there. So it was so easy for people to just go in there and just just dig them all up and not think, because it takes so long for them to,
7 years.
7 years for them to come to maturity. You need to think about that. So if you find a nice patch of it, family somewhere, you know, you don't take the whole thing. You just take part of it and you leave more for later. It can regenerate. It's one, but it's a very delicious food. I don't know if you could plant this in a garden because I never planted it. I mean, maybe if you had like a kind of a woody area, you could. Where it's dark, we usually find it in a darker, damp hillside or something. Yeah, and it's similar to garlic, so it really just helps your whole system to make the transition from winter to the springtime.
Yeah, this one is one I think you could definitely plant in your yard. Like you said, it's in a shady, cool spot. In fact, I have a friend who goes to the farmer's market where people collect leeks and sell them. At least some vendors do. And she'll buy a bunch that look pretty fresh and she'll bring it back to her yard and plant them. And has had some good luck with that. So yeah.
There's also one student from ESF that has project going now to replenish in Grand Tract in the valley, which is a very beautiful place to go, but unfortunately it's too easy and it got over harvested. So that's possible to help to recover in places like that. So she has found another area that's plentiful and is bringing them to replant.
Yeah, and of course, along with the transplant and making these little restoration plots, she's creating some signage, you know, trying to do some education, because a lot of people who garden, not this group because you're habitat garden, you garden with natives, but you know, think that every plant is like a marigold or a bean, right? You stick it in and it pops up. You know, it's producing a flower and fruit the same year. And as Jeannie said, these will take 7 to 10 years to reach maturity from the seed to the flowering individual. So they can be so easily over harvested. So the student took on this project to both try to help restore these ramp populations at the Rand Tract and also to provide some education. So at some point, there'll be hopefully some signage for those of you who go to the Rand Tract.
How do they reproduce?
They'll produce, I think, well, I guess it's there. They'll produce a flower and a fruit, a little black beady seed. It's like if you've ever raised anything in the allium family, like onions, very similar flowers.
Ramps are interesting in that, you know, they come up, you'll see them like this in May, and all the foliage,
Right.
but they don't flower until July. Everything dies back, and it'll be late June and July before they flower.
Yeah.
It's different than any other spring plant, different than any other one.
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay, here's another common thing probably most people know because it's everywhere. This is a very common ground plant called plantain. There's different types of plantain, but the most common one you see. I realize that it's not a native plant to this area, but it's been here for so long that it's evolved into part of what we use. If it's there, we learn to use it. This one has multiple uses. For one thing, it's very healing plant. You can make salves out of it, or you can cook the leaves as a tea. It's good for digestion, upset. It's just even a poultice of the raw leaves are good, like on a bee sting, or to take a splinter out. It's just endless. I think because it's everywhere, it could have been a nuisance. But I think when stuff happened, if you could just reach out and grab one, you know, you just learn to use it. So it's one of the most common plants that we use. I said those leaves are very good for scrapes, cuts, insect bites. I could also tell you that one of my brothers went on had an accident on a bike. He was like a grown man at this time, pretty big. So he did a whole bunch of flips over on a bicycle, and this arm, this whole thing was just swelled up, bruised. So we went off and we picked up a whole bunch of those plantain leaves. We covered his arm with those plantain. Then we wrapped it. And by the next day, that swelling was gone. I've even seen it used on maybe a cut that was beginning to fester, you know, to get a little bit of pussy or sore. If you made a poultice and pack that in there. But, there's just so many things you can do with that leaf. And also the stems that grow in the center can be used for diarrhea. But you need to be careful with that. There's usually 3 stems. So you would take that and make a little bit of tea, maybe just a couple cups. And if this person was suffering extreme diarrhea, I think a long time ago they called it summer complaint. You know, it was very, very bad. So this person drank one cup very slowly. And then you wait a number of hours, hopefully, and usually that will take care of it right there. But if it doesn't, and you wait, well, maybe 3 or 4 hours and take the second cup, that's almost 100% take care of it. But don't go any further than that, or you're going to have the opposite problem. So there are so many things, and I can't stop thinking about. We just make a plain salve out of it, maybe with a little olive oil or something like that, just plain it, and it can take care of so many different skin issues. And it's also extremely good for diaper rash. Oh, cool. A lot of people use it for diaper rash because it's so gentle and it works really well.
Yeah, I'll just add that there is a native plantain that looks very similar to the common plantain called Rugel's plantain. I don't know who Rugel was, but anyway, the difference is, or one of the big differences, it has the red at the base. It's a really deep purplish red, and they appear in the same habitats. I don't see it as commonly as I see like in lawns and such. Yeah, not as common. Yeah. Yeah, and
so you'd have to be a plant person to kind of go out to find the native one, you know, and the average person will just go and pick the leaves.
And I assume it would have the same medicinal qualities. I really don't know.
Red clover. Red clover is really good for, excuse me. Red clover is excellent for blood building, for strengthening the system. You make a nice tea with the red, I use the red cloves, I pick them, make tea, and they're also good for the soil. I fortunately at this part of town had a plentiful supply because we had a garden area that was like a parking lot, was like clay, and we wanted to have a garden there, so we were putting different things into the soil. We planted this red clover and it just was so wonderful. Wait a few years, So now I got a whole patch there. I can just go pick them. I don't have to go out searching. Yeah, so that's a really excellent for building blood and keeping the body strong. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add that, you know, you think of white clover and red clover in the genus Trifolium. They're not native plants. They were probably brought over to provide food for livestock. But they make great bee plants. Like my neighbor mows his lawn like really low. But sometimes these little white clovers come up and they're not native, but at least they provide the bees with some kind of food. So there's definitely some benefits to leaving the clover in your yard. And like Jeanne said, it can help as a soil amendment. But I also added this picture. We don't have any native trifolium clovers in New York State. They're all from Europe. But there is a trifolium that's more in the, occurs more in the Midwest. It's called running buffalo clover. But it doesn't occur here. Probably the closest place would be like Ohio or Kentucky. But we do have these really interesting native clovers like this wand bush clover that I don't see much anymore. You know, I read about this in historical flora. And this is interesting because this plant is supposed to sprout well after fire, and the fire is supposed to help the seeds germinate. And there are records for this around the Onondaga Nation. So, you know, you wonder if we don't have as much because it's just being swamped by European herbaceous plants as well as lack of fire. So here, this would be a cool one to try to grow for your group. And there's other native things we call clover, but just not in that genus.
Okay, this is another common thing, grows all over the place. It likes damp areas, grows along streams. But I also see it in some other shady, damp areas where there's no sign of water flowing or anything, which is coltsfoot. Coltsfoot has these big, beautiful yellow, has these yellow blossoms in the spring, which are very pretty and kind of brighten the spirit, because you know that it's coming, you know. And then the leaves, we use the leaves of coltsfoot. We can use the flowers, but I don't use them internally. You can use the flowers as a external type of what would you call it, to make a
Like a poultice.
yeah, like a poultice on the chest or congested. But for some reason, I don't use them as a tea. But the coltsfoot leaves you can use as a tea, and they are excellent for coffee. You know, sometimes you get this racking cough that doesn't stop. It just like this. A cup or two, sometimes just one big cup of coltsfoot tea will soothe that. I do that so many times on children, small children. You know, they're up half the night hacking and coffee. If you can get them to drink that, it'll soothe it almost immediately. That's another thing about using these different plants on children, like you mentioned, is unfortunately, in this day and age, most kids are accustomed to cherry flavored cough syrup and strawberry flavored whatever you buy, you know, all these imitation flavors. So I've always told everybody, if you start from the very beginning with small children and they get accustomed to using plant medicine, it won't be quite so hard because they'll be accustomed to taking in the natural taste of whatever you have. Sometimes people will put a little dab of honey in there, but I wouldn't do that with small babies. But yeah, so my grandchildren have grown, and my children have grown up being accustomed to the natural flavor of the medicine and not expecting it to taste like a strawberry or a cherry, a strawberry in the middle of winter, you know. So I've seen some parents trying to give plant medicine to children and they're not accustomed to it, so they're going to sneak it into the immune system. So I advise everybody to start from the beginning, otherwise you gotta go like this. So that's about that.
Yeah, I'll just mention that another common name for this plant is cougwort, which is very appropriate to to the medicinal. And I think that's. So that for the plants, we're a little kind of getting towards the end, but I mean, I'm watching the time, but
there was one other thing.
Oh, please. Oh, sure.
We don't have a picture of it here.
Oh, okay, please.
But I've seen some discussions about it, about purslane. I don't know if that's native or not, but it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up eating that and it's delicious. And people should know that they can transplant plots of it into gardens. And it grows on ground like this. It's like a succulent. I don't know offhand the nutritional values of it or anything, but just to let people know that many people think that purslane is not good. They'll pull it out of their vegetable garden or wherever they see it. But unfortunately, I've been able to go to some places where I think they got a full bunch of it. It's very, very good eating. And we've always eaten it. My parents had a whole bunch of kids, so fortunately, we always had a garden. So sometimes we would just go out there and harvest some of that fruit that would be part of our meal.
Yeah, as far as the nutritional value of purslane, it's very high in omega-3 fatty acids, you know, like salmon and other foods. I mean, there's just a few things that we can eat to get those important fatty acids. And when I see purslane, it's often, of course, growing in cracks in the sidewalks and that kind of thing. I wouldn't advise eating that, but I have a friend who, when she needs to weed her garden of purslane, she calls me and I come get it because it's probably a lot more nutritious than the other things she's growing. So anyway, do we have time to talk about? I know that we've been sitting for like an hour.
Yeah, and I don't know if we might answer the Q&A.
We could just go right into Q&A. Okay. Whatever folks want to do. Okay.
How about a fast talk?
Okay, we could just very quickly, Tully, if you want to say something.
Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah, we'll have a little bit discussion about this property you may have heard of in enclosed by the town of Tully. It's in the area called Tully, New York. I consider it's still part of Onondaga Nation. It always has been. Although we didn't physically have possession of it, the multinational chemical destructor, Allied Chemical, got possession of it. They did a whole bunch of destruction south of Syracuse in their pursuit for salt mines. So now we're in the process of negotiating to regain actual physical possession of it, although it is within our Aboriginal territory. I never thought of it as not being, but it's a beautiful place. It's quite pristine. There's fresh spring water flowing out, and Catherine has been more on the inside of the territory than I have, so I would like her to do a description of it, and wish us well that hopefully soon that we won't have to ask Honeywell permission to walk on this land, which we have to do now. Which is.
Okay. Yeah. So as Jeannie said, the Center for Native Peoples at ESF has been doing landscape assessment on this property, kind of help the nation with, thinking about land management decisions. So kind of the idea is to have indigenous-led conservation on this 1,000 acres in Tully, but we'll provide some information on, the plants and the fish and the wetlands, and water quality and where there might be some issues, et cetera. So it's 2 separate parcels. One we call the South Parcel, and that is right along the Tully Valley, the Valley Heads Moraine, if you're familiar with the Tully Valley at all. So just north of Route 80. And so that parcel goes all the way up to, well, it stops a little ways up before the mud boils. If you're familiar with the Tully Valley mud boils, that is not something, of course, the nation wanted. And then there's another property north of the mud boils. And there, of course, you have water quality issues in Onondaga Creek, but there's also some nice wetland there. So both parcels have some, like Jeanne said, some really nice habitat, despite the years of brine mining, and before that there was overgrazing, overharvesting, predator control. I mean, these lands have really been subject to a lot of not very wise care. However, one advantage that this property has is steep slopes, and that sort of kept the worst of sort of the logging and the grazing out. If you're familiar with Fellows Falls, that will be part of this property. So we're talking about the headwaters of Onondaga Creek. So there's some issues with the land from, past land use. There's also a gravel mine right on the moraine, which is, that's a whole nother set of problems. But overall, it's a really nice headwater property. There are native brook trout there that are spawning, as well as some really nice wetland areas and forest. So
What's a mud boil?
a mud boil, that's a great question. So a mud boil, sometimes they're called mud volcanoes. They're places on the valley bottom where you get water coming in on the valley walls, and because of artesian pressure, it pushes up through the bottom. And without the brine mining, it could have been just clean freshwater springs. But at least some people say, because of the years of brine mining, it fractured some of the bedrock and some of the other. I mean, took out huge amount of rock salt, so that things that were separate in the past layers are now mixing. So that water is going up to levels of very fine silt and clay, especially, and so it comes out as mud boil, mud bath. They look like little mud volcanoes, very, very fine clay. And that goes into Onondaga Creek. They tend to be kind of along Onondaga Creek. And obviously that raises the sediment level a lot. At one point, it was 30 tons a day going into the creek. Wow. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is now, but like if you're a trout, like you don't want to swim in that. It does a job on your gills, etc.
Yes, that's one of the things that has happened to the Onondaga Creek that flows into Onondaga Lake here, that bears our name, is that it has been so injured by these mud boils with all the sediment coming down. It slowed down the flow of water, so the water is warmer. So we no longer have the cold water fishery that's naturally there, but there are fish in there, but they're invasive fish that are able to live in this. There's not enough oxygen in the water for the native fish. So here we are, we live on Onondaga Nation, it's a small territory here. We have this one waterway coming through, with which we have historically stories and stories about our ancestors, our people before, that lived along the waterway. They gathered medicine, they caught fish, There was a major part of our diet was fish. And now we are deprived of the use of this water. It is so thick, you can't even see down through it. Our children cannot go play in the water. You can't even see what's in there. I better not say anymore because they're really.
Is there any mitigation process for the boils themselves? Is there any way to?
They've tried different things. They tried like releasing some pressure. So with, they call them depressurizing wells. So just by releasing excess water to try to reduce the amount that goes through and puts up the mud and the fine sediment and that kind of thing. But that kind of backfired because they started to get mud boils forming right around these depressurizing wells. So I don't know what they're thinking about now.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But those caverns underneath where the salt was mined from were just left, and that's what caused this disaster to happen. And so there are large portions of land that are sinking. There are farms there, and the area is farmland. And this one woman said she got up on her horse and she went to ride across the field to the other side. And the horse stopped. The horse would not go any further. So she gave up and she came back. And the next day, she got up and she looked out her window. Oh my. And it had sunk in somewhat. So it's left a whole unstable.
I think we'll wrap up and maybe have time for questions. Yeah.
I have a question about red clover. Is
Sure.
that perennial?
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah.
Red clover. The question was red clover is perennial, and it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you guys repeat questions?
Oh, sure.
So that the people on Zoom
Okay,
here,
got it.
Carol may wanna, do you wanna like feed in, do we wanna alternate? Are there Zoom questions?
Yeah, it might be Zoom questions.
You might wanna alternate.
Yeah.
You're done with this one.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a question online. Could you discuss common versus swamp milkweed, where to use? So we talked about common milkweed and butterfly weed, but this question about swamp milkweed.
It's a milkweed that grows in swamps with pink flowers.
The milkweed that we use for food grows in a field. It's not in a wetland or anything. And also there are different types of milkweed families. There are so many different ones. You look at the internal stem and you'll find one that's kind of ready. Don't pick that one. That's the way we tell the difference, yeah. And the other one is that one dogbane, yeah, dogbane is quite similar. I don't know, is it in the milkweed family?
I think so. There's a changing. Ask Joe.
Well, they used to be in separate families.
Yeah,
And
now
they put them in the same family now. Pocket ACE, the Squeaker ACE, those two families, and then they combine, I think.
Right, yeah, and of course, that plant's pretty tough.
They both have a pod.
In
They're both
edible.
milky.
I mean, the other thing, if somebody's asking about the common milkweed versus the swamp
Yes.
milkweed in terms of planting, it does not need to be wet.
Right.
And tolerate
Yes.
wet, the swamp milkweed.
Yeah.
It spreads in your garden by seeds. And the common milkweed, as you said, is rhizomatous, and that's going to spread a lot more aggressively
Yes.
in your garden. So if you have a home garden, And not a lot of them you might want to think twice about, even though it's going to be tasty. It's the downside of the common milkweed is that it can spread pretty aggressively.
Well, if you keep eating it.
Yeah. Point taken. Good idea. Yep.
I personally would welcome it. That's why I went out and back with these buckets and I threw water on them. Come back, come back.
Yep. So I love it. They put it on my box.
Oh, are there any questions in the room? Thank you.
I just wondered if you had any updates, Catherine, about Honeywell's restoration of the lake. Because I did help with planting like 8 or 9 years ago, put in cardinal flower and all kinds of things.
Wow.
And I haven't heard much of anything as to how it took species moving on their own, whether we're seeing anything adapting.
Yeah, I was out there, was it last year? I think they're in the, like the monitoring stage, where they're adding some plants, but also just making sure what they planted is, you know, they have to, as you probably know, like there's a threshold for the percent native cover they have to have, so I think that's the stage they're in. Jeannie may know more, or Joe may know more, yeah. I'm not sure. Other than we did go out with some folks who were on, you know, the Waste Bidby Harbor Brook site, and they were adding some aquatic plants around Harbor Brook. So continuing to add plants, but also kind of monitoring the plants that were there. Although there's a ton of velvet leaf. I don't know what they're doing about that, but adding plants where some had died. So I think they're in that stage, but at some point they're just going to leave it. That's my understanding.
I didn't know if there was a species threshold or a couple of minute species that they were aiming to try and reestablish.
I think there were.
They said we're done.
There were, but I think those were only for maybe 5 or 10 years. I don't think those were forever. But yeah, talk to Joe. He may know.
What specific area are you talking about?
I mean, I helped out next to the wildlife center, the center that they put in. That's where I was helping to plant, and they were trying to focus on shrub and native bird food cover and things like this. So yeah, I haven't been down there in forever.
Around the lake, I mean, I've been involved with the habitat restoration around the lake and the wetlands restoration, and all the plantings that were done were native species. And you know, we planted, you know, thousands and thousands of plants, you know, not species, but plants. And you know, they're doing very well.
Oh, good.
You know, they're doing very well.
I also brought some little booklets with me that over there. I would invite every one of you to take 1 or 2 and have many about the climate and the earth.
Hoodwinked,
climate things happening.
hoodwinked in the hot house, and there's some on the table.
Yeah, if you want to take a handful, please do. I have a lot of them.
Any more questions about here? I saw your hand up.
I have 2, if I may. First, thank you for your presentation. I'm curious how you, over generations, have developed the knowledge of how to use certain plants. I mean, I'm thinking like of the Dyson grass. How do you experiment and determine how plants are best used? And do you have any references for more research, for more a better understanding of how to use plants?
So I mean, the question was about how the Native Americans learn how to use the plants.
And other resources.
Yeah, I would just say that the reason that the way that I learned it, and I keep it, we just pass it down. It's part of life and common knowledge. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of things that some people might question that I don't even have to think about it or question it. Because somebody 2, 3, 4, 5 generations ahead of me already checked it out, so I'm the fortunate one on this end to learn what's already been proven. And I don't know of any future research kind of stuff, but we are having quite a good working relationship with the Center for Native Peoples at the ESF College, working pretty well together on plants and that's been really major bridge that's been happening for us. Up to that point, we don't do any kind of research or anything. I just do whatever is taught to me. Fortunate enough to not have to be the one that experiments. I'm down for a long time. Yeah.
That's a question over here.
Oh, kind of redundant. I was wondering if there was a recipe book or website to consult. You said a lot of plants were edible or used for medicine. That was kind of the question before too.
Not by me, but there's a million books out there that you can buy. There's a lot. I have always enjoyed books most of my life, so I have accumulated a good number along the way. Everywhere you turn, you'll find some. Maybe at some point we could do one. I don't know. We haven't reached that yet. Maybe.
Anybody else?
Carol, can you hear me?
Yes, that's it.
Yes.
Someone on Zoom shared that the city of Syracuse will give free sassafras trees to residents for street side plantings. And you go to their website and contact them through the Parks and Recs department. And the thing to know is sassafras is dioecious, so you need a male and a female.
Okay, so if you didn't hear that. No, we did not. I was just saying through this little tiny speaker here. Apparently the city of Syracuse offers free sassafras trees for street side planting. She says to contact Parks and Recreation Department at the website syracuse.gov. I'm not sure what the website is. And that sassafras is dioecious, she said? Yeah. Dioecious, so you need a male and a female. Is that it, Jill? Did I get it?
Yep.
Thank you.
You said it was Parks and Recreation?
Yeah, Parks and Rec, right? Jill?
Yes, Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, from the city of Syracuse.
Sassafras.
Yes. Anybody else?
Carol, can
Yes.
you find out how Zoomers might be able to get the booklet? Is it online?
I'll check. No, they're not on virtual container. Climate False Solution.
Oh, I have no. Yeah.
There's a website, Jill, climatefalsesolutions.org, all one word, climatefalsesolutions.org. We'll try it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's.
One more?
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I think Catherine mentioned that Syracuse was planted a plush cedar forest. So when it was cleared, did the lumber go into building houses or stoking the salt?
Carol had the right answer. She said all of the above. I think the cedar, because it was rot resistant, was used for homes, in particular roofs. You know, we didn't have these whatever roofs are made of now, but shingles, asphalt shingles, and so a lot of the
and early sewer pipes.
And sewer pipes,
Yeah,
yeah. So places where, you know, you needed like waterproof wood or rot resistant wood. That's a lot of what cedar was used for. But Carol's right. I mean, at one point they just used whatever fuel, whatever would burn and boil the salt because that had dollar value. So, but yeah, they would go. You know, you wonder how you log in a swamp. You go in the winter, you know, with your sleigh and your horses, and you cut down these, you know, massive cedars. I mean, they don't get quite as big as the white pine, but yeah, very sad. very little left of it. There's one tree, it's not a cedar, but it's a swamp white oak near, what's the name of that hotel? Kind of the 81 overpass.
The round?
Yeah, near that round
Crown
hotel.
Plaza.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what remains of that Erie Boulevard downtown swamp forest. So hopefully someone's gathering acorns from that tree and reproducing. But yeah, great question.
Anybody else? Let's thank our speakers.